The tension on that first-class flight from New York to Los Angeles could be cut with a knife. What began as whispers quickly escalated into something no one on that plane would ever forget. So this is what the NFL has come to: players who chase celebrity girlfriends instead of championships. The voice, cutting, deliberate, dripping with condescension, belonged to Richard West, the 52-year-old tech billionaire whose face regularly graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune. But today, his target wasn't a business rival startup founder. It was Travis Kelce, three-time Super Bowl champion, Kansas City Chiefs tight end, and yes, boyfriend of global superstar Taylor Swift. The other first-class passengers froze. Some pretended to be asleep. Others discreetly activated their phone cameras, sensing the viral moment unfolding before them. Kelce, who had been quietly reviewing game footage on his tablet, looked up slowly. The smile that had won over millions of fans was nowhere to be seen. Instead, his eyes reflected something deeper. A calculation, a decision being made in real time about how to respond. "I'm sorry. Have we met?" Kelce's voice was controlled, measured. Westfield leaned forward, gold cufflinks catching the cabin light. "We haven't, but I've watched your career trajectory with interest, particularly its recent swift turn away from football excellence toward celebrity tabloid status." Deton. The wordplay wasn't subtle. Neither was the intention behind it. What happened next would spiral into a PR disaster, a social media firestorm, and ultimately, a life-changing revelation that would bring one of America's most powerful men to his knees. But not in the way anyone could have predicted. Because what Richard Westfield didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have known when he decided to publicly humiliate Travis Kelce, was that this confrontation would expose the dark secret he'd spent $43 million keeping buried. A secret that connected him, in the most unexpected way, to the very relationship he so openly despised. And by the time he realized his catastrophic mistake, it would already be too late. "Does your girlfriend know you're just the latest in her collection?" Westfield continued, his voice rising just enough to ensure the entire first-class cabin could hear. "Or do you actually believe you're special, different from all the others who've been discarded once the publicity value dried up?" A flight attendant approached cautiously. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to—" "It's fine," Kelce interjected, raising a hand gently. His eyes never left Westfield. "Let him talk. I'm curious where this is going." That calm response seemed to infuriate Westfield even more. The tech billionaire, whose ruthless acquisition strategies had earned him the nickname the Liquidator in Silicon Valley, wasn't accustomed to such composed resistance. "Where this is going?" Westfield laughed, but there was no humor in it. "It's going exactly where your career is going. Nowhere. You were a Hall of Fame talent. Now you're just a celebrity boyfriend, a footnote, a distraction on the sidelines while she performs her little breakup song." Something shifted in Kelce's expression then. Not anger, but recognition. As if he'd suddenly understood something fundamental about the man attacking him. "This isn't about football at all, is it?" Kelce said quietly. Before Westfield could respond, a woman across the aisle spoke up. "Excuse me, but aren't you Richard Westfield of Pinnacle Technologies?" Westfield turned, momentarily distracted by recognition from someone he clearly deemed worthy of his attention. "I am." The woman, later identified as Elizabeth Chen, a prominent entertainment attorney, smiled coldly. "Interesting. I represented Microsoft in the acquisition proceedings last year. Before you gutted their workforce and canceled their family leave policy, of course." Whispers rippled through the cabin. Westfield's face darkened. "Business decisions aren't made to win popularity contests," he snapped. "Neither are dating choices," Kelce responded evenly. "Which brings us back to your unusual interest in my relation." That's when the flight hit unexpected turbulence, both literally and figuratively. As the plane shuddered and the seatbelt signs illuminated, Westfield's designer leather briefcase fell from the overhead compartment, spilling its contents across the aisle. Among the scattered papers, a magazine caught everyone's attention. Not because it was a business publication, but because it was a celebrity tabloid from 15 years earlier. The cover featured a young Taylor Swift, with her arm around a man whose face had been violently crossed out with black marker. Kelce saw it. Westfield saw him see it. And in that moment, something changed in the billionaire's eyes. A flash of something beyond anger. Something like fear. The tech mogul scrambled to collect his belongings, but not before multiple passengers had captured images of the strange discovery. By the time the plane landed 3 hours later, the confrontation and the mysterious magazine were trending nationwide. What no one yet realized was that the real story was much deeper than a billionaire's bizarre celebrity obsession. It stretched back decades to a small record label in Nashville, a young singer with big dreams, a cutthroat investor who'd orchestrated the biggest missed opportunity in music industry history. And for Richard Westfield, the public humiliation of Travis Kelce had just set in motion a chain of events that would unravel the carefully constructed mythology of his entire career. The video had reached 47 million views in less than 24 hours. Tech billionaire melts down over Taylor-Travis relationship, screamed the headline. Social media was ablaze with theories, from the plausible to the absurd. Travis Kelce had maintained dignified silence, responding only with a brief statement through his representative. "I appreciate the support, but prefer to focus on preparation for Sunday's game, rather than unfortunate in-flight encounter." Taylor Swift, currently on the European leg of her Eras tour, had yet to comment publicly. Richard Westfield, however, was in full crisis management mode. Ensconced in his Malibu mansion, he barked orders at his PR team through video conference. "I don't care what it costs. Kill this story, now." Melissa Reeves, his veteran PR director, looked uncomfortable. "Sir, we've already offered exclusives to 3 major outlets with your explanation about the stress of the Meridian merger. But there's complication." "What complication?" Westfield demanded. "The magazine. People are digging. Someone identified it as a 2008 issue when Taylor Swift was just starting out, and they're connecting dots to Luminary Records." The blood drained from Westfield's face. "That's impossible. The acquisition was through a shell company. My name was never—" "Sir," Melissa interrupted, something she rarely dared to do. "Someone leaked the original paperwork this morning. It's everywhere." Westfield terminated the call without another word. For the first time in decades, the billionaire's hands were shaking, because the world was about to discover what only a handful of music industry insiders knew. In 2008, Richard Westfield, then a hungry young investor, had acquired Luminary Records, the small label that had signed a promising 17-year-old Taylor Swift to her first contract. Within 6 months, he had deemed her commercially unviable and dropped her just weeks before she was signed by Big Machine Records and launched into superstardom. It was the worst business decision of his career, a mistake that would have cost him billions in lost revenue. And he had spent years erasing every connection between himself and that catastrophic judgment call. Westfield's phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello?" he answered cautiously. "Mr. Westfield." The voice was instantly recognizable. Measured, calm, Travis Kelce. "I think we should finish our conversation in person." 30 minutes later, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to Westfield's gate. But it wasn't just Travis Kelce who emerged. Scott Borchetta, the founder of Big Machine Records, who had signed Swift after Westfield dropped her, stepped out as well. And with him was Marcus Reynolds, Westfield's former business partner, who had strongly objected to dropping Swift from the label. The partner Westfield had later forced out, bought out, and legally silenced through ironclad NDA. The partner who, apparently, had kept receipts all these years. As they approached the front door, Westfield's security team looked to him for instruction on whether to allow them in. The panic in the billionaire's eyes was answer enough. This wasn't just about a viral PR disaster anymore. This was about the carefully constructed narrative of his business genius being dismantled in real time, because no truly brilliant investor would have looked at the young Taylor Swift and seen anything but the global phenomenon she would become. What the world would soon learn was even more damaging. Westfield had dropped Swift not because of business analytics, but because she had politely declined his inappropriate dinner invitation, an invitation extended to a teenager by a man 25 years her senior. The truth would destroy not only his reputation, but potentially his empire. And it was all because he couldn't resist the impulse to publicly attack the relationship that had been a constant, painful reminder of the greatest miscalculation of his life. As the 3 men entered his home, Westfield attempted to regain control. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but this borders on harassment." Travis Kelce simply took a seat uninvited, calm and collected. "Actually, I believe harassment is what happened on that flight yesterday. I'm just here to understand why. Marcus Reynolds placed a USB drive on the glass coffee table. And I'm here because I'm tired of pretending I didn't see what I saw 15 years ago. The NDA you paid me $3 million to sign expired last month. Interesting timing, isn't it? Westfield felt the walls closing in, but desperately clung to his only remaining leverage. This is absurd. You have nothing concrete, only allegations that will drown in litigation for years. Scott Borchetta smiled thinly. About that, you might want to check your email. As if on cue, Westfield's phone pinged. The subject line froze his blood. FW, conversation with R. Westfield, March 14, 2008, R.E.T. Swift contract termination. The email contained a voice recording. His voice. Words he never imagined would resurface. I don't care about her potential. She declined my invitation. No one does that. Drop her. Find me someone more appreciative of opportunity. How did you... Westfield couldn't finish the sentence. Your former assistant had a conscience, Borchetta explained, and remarkable foresight to record a conversation she found troubling. She sent me this years ago for safekeeping. What happened next would change everything. Again. Because as Westfield lunged for his phone in panic, Travis Kelce received a message of his own from Taylor Swift, with something no one in that room could have anticipated. The atmosphere in the mansion shifted as Travis Kelce read the message on his phone. His expression changed from determined to genuinely surprised. "Taylor just sent me something interesting," he said, looking directly at Westfield. A video from a young woman named Sophia Westfield. The billionaire's face went ashen. "My daughter has nothing to do with it." Apparently, she disagreed. Kelce continued, turning his phone to show the message. "She says she's been following her father's obsession with Taylor for years. Says she has diary, email, recorded conversations where you've railed against Taylor's success. Called it the mistake that haunts you." "This is preposterous," Westfield stammered, but the conviction had drained from his voice. "Your daughter also mentions your reaction when she put Taylor's music on during a family dinner last year," Kelce continued. "How you smashed a $30,000 vase and locked yourself in your study for 3 days. She thought it was just general misogyny. Now she understands it was something much more specific." Marcus Reynolds leaned forward. "Your daughter reached out to Taylor's team 6 months ago, Richard. She didn't know why her father had this irrational hatred for a singer she admired. Started connecting dots on her own. Sophia wouldn't betray family," Westfield insisted, but uncertainty crept into his voice. "Family?" Scott Borchetta raised an eyebrow. "The same family you've neglected for empire building? The daughter whose college graduation you missed for the Bloomberg Summit? The same daughter who's applying to music production programs against your explicit threats to cut her off financially?" The revelation visibly shook West. His carefully compartmentalized worlds were colliding catastrophic. Travis Kelce's phone rang. He answered, listening briefly before looking at Westfield with new intensity. "That was my attorney. The flight attendant from yesterday just submitted a sworn statement about what she heard you say before the recording started, about your missed opportunity with Taylor. Words that corroborate exactly what's on that USB drive." For the first time, genuine fear registered on the billionaire's face. Not just fear for his reputation or business, fear for his entire carefully constructed life. "What do you want?" he finally asked, defeat evident in his voice. Travis Kelce stood, straightening to his full, imposing height. But when he spoke, it wasn't with threat or intimidation. "Originally, just an understanding of why a complete stranger would attack me so personally. Now, I think this goes far beyond." Borchetta nodded. "The recording goes public tomorrow, unless you agree to 3 conditions. First, a public apology, not just to Travis and Taylor, but to every young artist you've bullied or manipulated throughout your career. Second," Reynolds continued, "your immediate resignation from Pinnacle Technologies' board, with a statement acknowledging your pattern of retaliatory business practice." Westfield laughed hollowly. "You want me to destroy everything I've built over a decades-old mistake?" "No," Travis said quietly. "We want accountability for a pattern that started decades ago and continued right through yesterday on that plane. The attack on me wasn't isolated. It was just the latest example of your inability to accept responsibility for your own bad judgment." "And the third condition?" Westfield asked, voice barely audible. Kelce checked his phone one more time, reading a new message from Taylor. This comes directly from Taylor. She says your daughter Sophia has incredible talent as a music producer. Taylor's offering her an internship with her production team. No strings attached, regardless of what you decide here today. The billionaire's composure finally broke completely. The man who had engineered mergers worth billions, who had testified before Congress without breaking a sweat, who had ruthlessly crushed countless competitors, put his face in his hand. She's all I have left, he whispered. After the divorce, Sophia is the only one who still... His voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. The mighty Richard Westfield, whose wealth could buy almost anything, couldn't repair his relationship with his only child. As the three men prepared to leave, giving Westfield until morning to make his decision, Travis handed him one last piece of paper. "What's this?" Westfield asked, confusion momentarily replacing despair. "A fourth option," Travis replied. "One Taylor and I came up with. Might be worth considering." After they left, Westfield sat alone in his vast, empty mansion, staring at the document. For the first time in decades, he was confronted with a problem money couldn't solve and power couldn't overcome. By morning, he had made his decision, one that would stun the business world, the music industry, and most of all, his daughter, Sophia. But the true repercussions were still to come. Because there was one crucial detail about his connection to Taylor Swift that even Richard Westfield himself didn't know yet. The press conference was unprecedented. Richard Westfield, the notoriously media-averse billionaire who had given only 3 interviews in the past decade, stood before a forest of microphones at Pinnacle Technologies headquarters. His statement was brief but seismic. Effective immediately, he was stepping down as CEO and chairman of the company he had founded. But instead of citing personal reasons or health concerns, the typical euphemisms for forced resignation, Westfield spoke with surprising candor. "My behavior on flight AA2187 was inexcusable," he began, voice steady despite the visible strain on his face. But it wasn't isolated. It was the manifestation of a pattern that has defined too much of my professional and personal life. A pattern of retribution against those who challenge me, and an inability to acknowledge my own failure. The business press was stunned. Wall Street analysts watched in disbelief as Pinnacle's stock plummeted in real time. But Westfield continued undeterred. 15 years ago, I made a catastrophic business decision driven by personal pettiness. I disregarded sound advice and terminated a young artist's contract not because of her talent, which was exceptional, but because she declined my inappropriate advances. Gasps echoed through the room. This went far beyond the expected damage control. That artist was Taylor Swift, and my subsequent action, attempting to erase my connection to this decision, punishing those who questioned it, and harboring an irrational resentment toward her success, reflect failings far more significant than a single bad business call. Cameras flashed furious as Westfield took a deep breath before continuing. Yesterday, I was offered several paths forward. I've chosen the most difficult: complete transparency and accountability. Effective immediately, I'm establishing the Westfield Ethics in Entertainment Fund with an initial endowment of $200 million. This independent foundation will support young artists, particularly women, who face exploitation or retaliation in the entertainment industry. At the back of the room, Travis Kelce stood watching, arms crossed. Next to him was Sophia Westfield, 22, seeing a side of her father she'd never witnessed before. "Finally," Westfield said, voice wavering slightly, "I want to publicly apologize to Mr. Travis Kelce for my unprovoked attack, to Ms. Swift for my inexcusable behavior both recently and years ago, and to my daughter Sophia, who has shown more integrity and courage in the past week than I have demonstrated in my entire career." As questions erupted from the assembled journalists, Westfield simply stepped away from the microphone. The press conference was over, but the story was far from finished. 2 weeks later, Richard Westfield sat in a small cafe in Nashville, a deliberate choice of location. Across from him was Scott Borchetta, the man who had recognized Taylor Swift's star potential when Westfield had callously dismissed it. "I didn't expect you to actually take the fourth option," Borchetta admitted. "Complete transparency is typically kryptonite to men in your position." Westfield nodded, staring into his untouched coffee. "I've spent 15 years making decisions to protect a reputation built on a lie. It was exhausting." "And Sophia?" A genuine smile, perhaps the first in years, crossed Westfield's face. She started her internship with Taylor's production team last week, called me after her first day. We talked for 3 hours. First real conversation we've had in years. Porchetta studied the fallen titan carefully. You know, there's something about this whole situation no one's figured out yet. Something not even you know. Westfield looked up, puzzled. Porchetta slid an old contract across the table, one of the original agreements from Luminary Records. Look at the legal counsel line. Westfield scanned the document, then froze. The attorney who had drafted his acquisition of Luminary, the very deal that had given him control over Swift's early contract, was James Kelce of Kelce, Bradshaw and Morris. Travis Kelce's father, Porchetta confirmed, watching realization dawn across Westfield's face. Travis knew this whole time? Porchetta shook his head. He found out the morning after your confrontation. His father called him after seeing the viral video, explained the connection. James Kelce has carried his own guilt for years about his role in drafting those predatory contract terms for young artists. Westfield sat back, stunned by the interconnectedness of it all. So when Travis came to my home, he was confronting demons that affected his family, too. The Kelce family donated their entire legal fee from that transaction to music education programs years ago, their own quiet atonement. The symmetry was almost poetic. Father and son Kelce finding different paths to address the same historical wrong that Westfield had perpetuated. 3 days later, Richard Westfield received a text message containing only a time, date, and address in Los Angeles. When he arrived at the nondescript recording studio, he found Travis Kelce waiting outside. She agreed to 15 minutes, Travis said simply, holding the door. Inside, seated at a piano, was Taylor Swift, the artist whose career trajectory had haunted Westfield for 15 years, the woman whose success had become a persistent reminder of his worst business decision and moral failing. No cameras, no attorneys, no PR team. Mr. Westfield, she acknowledged with a slight nod. Ms. Swift, he replied, remaining standing, unsure of protocol in this unprecedented situation. I've never publicly discussed what happened at Luminary, she began without preamble. Not in interviews, not in songs, not even in my documentary. Do you know why? Westfield shook his head. Because that early rejection was valuable, she said, surprising him completely. It taught me that some people will never see your worth, no matter how obvious it becomes later. That lesson shaped how I've navigated my entire career. She played a few idle notes on the piano before continuing. I wasn't innocent in all this. I knew what your dinner invitation really meant, even at 17, and I knew there would be consequences for declining. I just underestimated how long those consequences would echo. Westfield found himself at a loss for words, a novel experience for a man who had built an empire on persuasive communication. I didn't request this meeting to accept your apology, Taylor continued. I requested it because your daughter Sophia has extraordinary talent, generational talent, and she's terrified that pursuing her passion will mean losing her father forever. Sound familiar? The pointed question landed precisely as intended. I almost made the same mistake with her that you made with me, Westfield admitted, trying to control her path rather than supporting her journey. Taylor nodded, then stood. 15 minutes are up, but there's something you should see before you leave. She led him to a small control room where Sophia sat at a mixing board, tears streaming down her face. She had heard everything. Dad, she said, standing. What happened next wasn't recorded by any camera or documented in any press release. The embrace between father and daughter, both broken and healing in different ways, was witnessed only by Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift, who quietly left the room to give them privacy. Outside the studio, Travis put his arm around Taylor's shoulder. Worth canceling your afternoon rehearsal? She leaned into him, watching through the glass as Richard and Sophia Westfield began the long, complicated process of reconciliation. Some things matter more than perfect performances, she replied. Sometimes the most important work happens when the spotlight's off and the audience is gone. 6 months later, Taylor Swift released her new album. The final track, a collaboration with a promising new producer named Sophia Westfield, was titled First Class Revelation. It never explicitly mentioned Richard Westfield or the infamous flight confrontation, but the message of accountability, forgiveness, and second chances was unmistakable. As for Richard Westfield, he never returned to Pinnacle Technology. Instead, he he accepted a teaching position at a business school where his first course, now consistently waitlisted, was titled Ethical Failure: My Journey from Arrogance to Accountability. The Ethics in Entertainment Fund, meanwhile, had already provided legal support to 23 young artists fighting exploitative contracts, tangible impact from a public fall from grace that had ultimately become something far more meaningful, a genuine redemption. And it had all begun with a confrontation in first class, a privileged man's attempt to humiliate someone who reminded him of his greatest failure, not realizing that in doing so, he would finally be forced to confront not just what he had done 15 years ago, but who he had allowed himself to become. Sometimes regret is the beginning of wisdom, and sometimes humiliation is the first step toward humility.